What you are about to listen to is only a part of the story of the last deployment, detailing the end of the West's direct involvement in Afghanistan, an endeavor which lasted near 20 years. The steady then rapid withdrawal of military forces, culminating in the evacuation from Hamid Karzai International Airport in August 2021, is a scenario echoed from our past, but it is in itself an entirely unique story that at once exposes both the brokenness of humanity and reveals its beautiful potential. For months, weeks, days, men and women from around the world came to give hope and life where both soon were in short supply. These stories are recorded and shared for their sake, for their families, and for posterity.
My name's Liam Poole. I was a corporal in the United States Marine Corps. I was with 2nd LAR, originally Bravo Company, and then I deployed with Charlie Company. When we deployed, we got attached to 1-8, and we were on the 22nd MEU, 24th MEU. I forget which MEU we were on, but it was the USS Iwo Jima. We went through the MEU and ultimately ended up in Kabul, Afghanistan last year. I'm 25 years old, and I was born in Darby, Pennsylvania. It's just outside of Philadelphia.
Your experience joining the Corps, why the Corps, expectations, what down to just go loose, however you feel like?
Well, I originally enlisted because I guess I had a feeling of if I don't do it, I'm going to regret it. I felt like if I have the ability and the desire to do it, then I have an obligation to do it out of the fact of how many people can do it and don't, and how many people want to do it that can't. So with me being able to do both, I kind of felt an obligation, especially with no one in my family within probably the last 50 years and being, enlisting in the military. So I felt like it was overdue. And ultimately it wasn't exactly what I had expected at first, but, it kind of became what I had expected, the camaraderie and getting to do all the cool stuff and things like that. So I kind of went into it with no real expectations other than kind of what everyone expects, like what you see in movies and what people talk about. And those expectations were about 10 to 15 years out of date. But, it ultimately all came around. So.
And so what was your experience enlisting, going through the training cycle?
Well, I always found, in every instance of training, no matter what it is, it's always going to challenge you the way you're going to be challenged. It varies person to person, but that's the whole point of the different trainings and stuff. I was always pretty good when it came to the knowledge sections, learning different weapon systems, learning about armor identification, learning about all that kind of stuff. For me, the biggest challenges were usually physically. Bit of a smaller guy. Going through my enlistment, I was pretty steady, about like 5'8", 155 pounds. It was usually the physical part for me, especially not ever being really introduced into being very physical before that. But, I kind of found my way and got some help from friends who did know about that stuff. So going through training, it always sucks, but you always like going, looking back on it. It's fonder memories than it is in the present. So.
And you went through boot camp at Parris Island?
Yeah. I went to Parris Island. I arrived March 5th of 2018, and I graduated June 1st of 2018.
I feel like you got out just before it got really hot.
Yeah. When I first got to boot camp, it was still about 30 degrees. And when I had left, it was just pushing up into the mid to high 80s. So it was, when I first got there, everyone got pneumonia the first week because they would sleep with the windows open like it was summertime for fresh air. And so the whole squad bay would become freezing cold and you just got one wool blanket to keep you warm. So everyone got real bad pneumonia for the first week. And by the time we got to the Crucible, it was already ungodly humid and hot. And so we just kind of got screwed on both ends.
I mean, I was there from May to August, and even then, I remember we had the windows closed most nights, but it still got cold as hell in those squad bays. I remember that.
Yeah.
It did not matter how hot the day was.
Yeah.
It was always cold at night.
It's just a big concrete building, so there's no way to really get it hot.
Any stories or experiences you want to talk about boot camp?
Yeah, I mean, it's always boot camp's the funniest place you're not supposed to laugh. So there's all kinds of stories and stuff. One of the guys, Stitz, he had kept a secret journal about every day, about just the funny, dumb things that happened. I always think it's funny thinking back onto the first time, you just get zero privacy. And so the first time they just shoved 45 people into the shower at the same time. And then everyone's all freaked out by it. And by day 3, people are doing like tribal dances just in the showers, just being absolute nutcases. So it's just funny watching that transition over time of people finding the instances that they were originally shied away from and then just fully embracing them after time of just being forced to. It's cool watching those transitions, I guess, but it's funny to watch in the present.
Yeah, I remember telling my wife sometimes stories about it, and it's just like, because, well, the toilets, no stalls or nothing, just a bunch of toilets in a decent sized room, and you're just like sitting there taking a shit, and you're looking across the way, and somebody else is sitting there taking a shit, and you're just like, what's up?
Well, that almost became like the barber shop where everyone would just sit down and just talk and just hang out and read their mail. There's always someone yelling at someone because they're not going fast enough. They got to go to the bathroom and stuff. So. Yeah, it's always interesting having to stack up 3 people to one urinal because you got 30 seconds to do everything you got to do. So,
I remember we called it the Congress. That's what we called the shitters. And I think at one time we were at the gas chamber or something, and we shoved like maybe 12 recruits into one porta potty.
Yeah, I remember they'd given us the I don't know. I guess they were like the jiu-jitsu gloves that we never used. And guys would dig them out of their sea bags. And at night, at like probably 2 o'clock in the morning, they'd have a fight club in the shower of just people just beating the piss out of each other. And then just using those, you could only hit with the gloves. So that way it wouldn't leave any bruises. So the next day, the instructors wouldn't have any idea. But yeah, I just remember hearing people beat the crap out of each other every time we go to use the bathroom at 2-3 o'clock in the morning just before we woke up. Yeah, it was always funny.
And after boot camp, I'm assuming you went to Geiger.
Yeah. We had to wait, I think, 2 weeks in a holding company while the boot camp class behind us graduated because we didn't have enough people for our ITB class. So we got put up in Mike Company in Geiger for 2 weeks, waiting for them for Delta Company from boot camp to show up so we could be in Delta Company in ITB. And we ended up doing that. And once Delta Company showed up and we went on to our actual training phase, they sat us all down, all like 200 people, basically of one squad bay. They just told us, sit there, shut up, don't do anything. 2 of the instructors came in with a list. They had started reading off names, and my name was like the 8th one down. And they said, hey, if you're one of these 20 names we just read, grab all your stuff, go up to the 3rd story, and sit there and wait quietly. I was like, I've seen this in movies. I'm like, they're gonna start experimenting on me. This is it. I was like, no one's gonna know I ever existed, all that stuff. So. But that's when, they came in and they said, hey, you guys are the guys with the highest GT scores. You've been selected to be 0352 missilemen. And they're like, you guys know what that is? And nobody knew what the hell that was. I had enlisted trying to be a machine gunner till we did the Crucible. And I realized how much I hate hiking with weight. And I was like, man, I'm not hiking with a 22-pound machine gun. That's not going to happen. And then they go, yeah, you guys are the guys that carry the most weight because just one Javelin missile is like 30 pounds. And I'm just like, sweet. I really got screwed. And they're like, yeah, you have no choice because you guys are the smart guys, so you have to deal with the missiles. I was like, awesome. So I did the whole training. I actually really enjoyed it. I graduated. I mean, they expect everyone to graduate top, so obviously you can't graduate top. I missed 1 point on one of the disassembly tests for one of the missile systems, and they ended up the top of the classes got to shoot missiles at the end of the class, and I missed it by the 1 point. So they gave it to my buddy Lewis, who he ended up shooting a javelin, which I would have really liked to, but hey, bygones be bygones. So, but yeah, that was I found out ITB. So boot camp is pretty chill for the most part. It's kind of just like a mind game the whole time, but ITB was like what I expected boot camp to be was what ITB was, where I watched, I saw instructors, drop kick dudes in the chest and push them up against the wall by their throat and things like that. And it's rough but that's what you got to do to start the basic building block. The dudes who are going to go into combat, you got to desensitize them to being shocked by violence. And no one was ever hurt by anything. It was mostly just for shock and awe. Most people have never been pushed or abruptly hit or anything in their life. So you push someone in the back, they're going to freeze and not know what's going on. So it's just kind of doing that to get people out of that mentality of just being shocked by violence. And we did the medical training. They would show us for probably like an hour or more, just videos of people getting blown up and shot, all kinds of stuff, just to desensitize to just gruesome violence and things like that. So it's not easy at first, but eventually it comes and you start just kind of being like, okay, it's what it is. Which stuff like that isn't a replacement for actually the first time seeing shocking and violent things, but it definitely helps you rationalize in your mind. It's less of a jump into cold water, I guess.
Were your combat instructors all combat vets? I think all of mine, but like one was a combat vet.
So all of my instructors were combat vets. I think about half of them had confirmed kills in combat, things like that. We had one of the first female instructors. She was a mortarman instructor. She had originally, I don't remember what her original MOS was, but she had reclassed, I think, lat moved to being a mortarman, and she was one of the first females to pass ITB, and I think as a sergeant became certified as a mortarman, and that was her. I guess that would have been her secondary MOS, or I don't know if she lat moved and became her primary MOS. But either way, she was. I think she was the only one that wasn't in combat. I could be wrong, but I don't think she was a mortarman if she was ever in combat. I think she had something to do with motor transport or something like that prior. But yeah, all of my instructors were at least had one deployment to Afghanistan, if not there was one instructor, I'm pretty sure he had at least two and maybe one to Iraq. He was a little bit of an older guy, so. But yeah, they were all pretty salty. I know one of the machine gun instructors, I'd seen him years down the road doing a not training, I guess it was a tryout for MARSOC, so. I mean, he was still running and gunning for a good while, so I guess he was trying to get back into it. Yeah, they were all pretty salty, pretty well tested. Really, actually, they were all kind of assholes. But I mean, looking back, they had a right to be assholes because we were all a bunch of stupid idiots. But it was actually it was a blessing to have those guys because they had the experience and the knowledge for when we had those questions about either job related or just generalizing about going into fighting and the mentality and stuff. They had those answers, or at least enough for us to get the idea. So it was honestly a blessing to have those guys.
Yeah, and it was the same for me in my class. Like I would say they're all assholes, but at the same time they looked out for you and they wanted you to learn and be prepared for whatever eventuality if you did eventually go into combat.
Yeah, definitely. And
so you were singled out from the beginning to be a 52.
Yeah. Yeah, so I was one of the original prospects. They don't actually do any of the actual MOS, job specific training until like halfway through when you get to the split. I was originally prospected to be a 52 from the start. And I think all of us except for like one or two, we had two guys get dropped out. One went to the psych ward and one got kicked out for refusal to train, which is coincidentally they were brothers. They were the one, the younger one. The one day they had found him out in the quad just at like midnight, just sweeping in his boxers or in his skivvies. And they came up and they were like, "What are you doing?" He's like, "I'm on a secret mission from the president." Just literally just all the marbles were gone. And they actually, it's the same asshole instructors. They were actually really good about it. They were like, "Okay, like, you want to come wait inside and stuff like that?" It wasn't like Full Metal Jacket where they goes complete psycho on them. They were able to kind of keep it at a calm, collected level till medical personnel came, picked him up, took him to the psych ward. He was gone probably about a month later. And then his brother, literally 3 days before graduation, just quit, just decided he wasn't going to do it anymore. He wasn't going to take the final test. He just gave up on everything. It wasn't until after that we found out that their older brother, a year and a half prior, had also enlisted in the Marine Corps and had also not made it for some mental related thing. And we were just like, man, they're Marine Corps 3 for 3 on that family. They're not flying any Marine Corps flags on 4th of July, They're not having a good reputation. But yeah, pretty much everyone from the start who was prospected to be a 52 became a 52. There was one dude that they pulled from the 11s course to be a 52, and he was so resentful for it the whole time because he just wanted to be the dude kicking doors in and everything. And to this day, he absolutely loves being a missileman. Like he posts pictures and videos of them at the range all the time and stuff like that. So it was just annoying to hear him complain the whole time, and now he's all about it. So
I'm sure once he shot his first missile, that was.
Oh yeah, it's tough to send a 65-pound anti-tank missile downrange and not be excited. It's a big adrenaline rush, So knowing that one little accidental muscle twitch, you just wasted almost like $70,000 of taxpayers' money into the dirt. It's an anxious job, but it's fun.
So from Geiger, graduated around what time, and where'd you go?
So Geiger, we got there June 10th, spent 2 weeks. So we started right at the beginning of July, because I remember we had like training day 1 and then we had 4th of July weekend. So they like didn't do anything for the first like 4 days. So it was like early July. I think it was late September we had graduated, and the class before us all went to 2nd LAR. All 25 people all went to 2nd LAR. And we were like, basically everyone was expecting us to go to different Victor units, 1-8, 2-2, 3-6. We were all expecting to go to different cap platoons. That's basically how they had trained us the whole time, is to go to cap platoons. It's like college graduation, or college acceptances. You start seeing where your orders are. You see where all your buddies are going and who got it taken to what units. And we all started noticing from the codes we were going to 1st LAR, 2nd LAR, 3rd LAR, alphabetically. So like the 1st, 3rd alphabetically went to 1st. I was in the middle, so I ended up going to 2nd. The last of the alphabet guys, they all went to 3rd LAR. I was excited because, that was the closest I was going to be to being a mechanic like I was prior to the Marine Corps. So I was really excited. I love vehicles. I love getting to do all that stuff. So being able to be on like an actual like armored vehicle crew was like something I was super excited about. Everyone else was super upset. And then after we did our final range, they brought us all into the classroom for the missileman ceremony, when everyone who shot a missile gets a O-ring snapped on their throat. And they had brought us in, and they had the projector screen down, and they lifted the projector screen and showed everyone's name and showed all these different units, like Victor 1-8, Victor 2-6, Victor 1-7, like all these units, and everyone going everywhere. And they were like, yeah, we're all playing a joke on you. No one's going to LAR. You're all going to your victory units. They were all excited, super happy. I was super let down. And they were like, nah, just kidding. You're all going to LAR. Haha, losers. And I was super excited. And they were all like ready to kill themselves. And yeah, that was on the Saturday. That was our final range. And I think our graduation was the following Monday or Tuesday or something like that. And we graduated. So most of the other guys, they were getting sent to California, where one first LAR and third LAR were. But second LAR was just down the road at Camp Lejeune. So everyone else was getting ready to get picked up by their families to get taken to the airport or whatever. And we had some corporal had come up to us and they were like, hey, are you Poole? And I was like, yeah. And they were like, all right, do you know these guys? And he showed me a list of like 7 names, and it was all the guys going to second LAR. And I was like, yeah, I know them. I'll go grab them. So I grabbed them, brought them all over, and then a gunnery came up, and then I think it was a gunnery sergeant and our master sergeant came up. I was like, what the I was like, why are we it was our section leader, our platoon sergeant, our company gunny, and our battalion master guns all showed up to pick us up. And I was like, why couldn't it have just been some lance corporals? I was like, I don't want to. So I ended up riding shotgun with my company gunny as a private. I was still a private because even though I'd gone to vocational school, they didn't count those credits. So I was a 21-year-old private who was older than most of my corporals, which is just absolutely garbage. It sucks being told what to do by a 19-year-old kid. So he had taken us to our unit, and we had started the whole process, and we were the first boot drop in our company in like a year and a half. So not only did the weapons guys want to come in and mess with us, that, was our platoon, all of their buddies who were all of the 11s and the crewmen and everybody just wanted to come and screw with us. So we would get our room inspections done, and it would be by like 11 people at once. And it was just an absolute shit show every time. It's funny to think about now, but at the time we were living in pure panic and anxiety for like almost a year, for like probably definitely the first like 6 months, just getting messed with by the entire company until basically the next boot drop showed up, and then they kind of ignored us. But yeah, it was actually really cool going to weapons. I really lucked out and got a lot of really fantastic NCOs that, started me on my Marine Corps path and kind of showed me right from wrong and etiquette when it came to infantry etiquette, kind of like dealing with things without paperwork and just looking out for your buddies and things like that. And they were, you really can't beat the seniors that I had. I mean, it came at a price of getting screwed with all the time over everything, but it's like having a big brother. So
do you remember the guys that you were with initially? I'm pretty sure you had some of my peers that I graduated ITB with.
Probably. I remember, well, I had Martis, Sergeant Martis. He was Corporal Martis. He was the one who picked us up from ITB. It was Martis, Corporal Tarowski, Sergeant White. There was Mulcahy. Our platoon sergeant was, I can see his face. But I can't remember his name right now. We had a lieutenant for like the first week, but he ended up going to Recon. I think it was Recon. It was Lieutenant Seacrest. I remember that. I think I have his phone number in my phone still.
I think I remember him.
Yeah, he was really cool. He was a really cool dude, but I only really knew him for like a week. He was already on his way out because they had all just come back off their deployment so recently that we had dealt with them for like 2 weeks, and then they all went on post-deployment leave. Like right at the same time we got hit with Hurricane Florence. So we were just like unsupervised for like 2 weeks, 3 weeks. But yeah, it was Yeah, there's a whole bunch of Roberts. I remember Roberts. A bunch of really good dudes. But yeah, they showed us right from wrong in the expectations, and being a less supervised platoon, being weapons platoon, and being less understood than most of the other line platoons. Basically, if we were able to kind of keep our shit together and stay on top of our game, we got left alone by the company. They didn't expect us to go out on these different training ops for like the crewmen and the 11s, as long as our guys were on top of their stuff and at, you know, peak performance. So we ended up doing a lot of our own training. We had actually didn't have vehicles for the first 4 months that I was there. We didn't have any vehicles because they had just gotten rid of the old Hammerhead LAVs, and they were waiting on the new, we started calling them the Wally turrets, but the new Missileman turrets with the remote turret. And we were waiting on those ones. I think we got them in January of 2019. So we didn't even have any vehicles to practice on because we had trained on Humvees up to that point, and we didn't have any new vehicles to start learning from scratch. So didn't
y'all come down to our vehicles at one point? Because we got ours about maybe in the spring 2018, summer 2018.
Yeah, I remember that they had brought over a vehicle on our I guess it was like indoctrination day or whatever, like our first day there when we showed up. They had a vehicle parked out in front of the company office for us to check out, and for our families to check out. And they were like, yeah, this is pretty sweet, but you won't have one for like a hot minute. I was like, thanks. But yeah, it was, I think that we had done a little bit of training on optimal opportunities where we borrowed vehicles. I think I remember doing reload drills, which to this day I still hate. But yeah, I think we had borrowed them a few times, but we didn't actually get any of our own vehicles till like January 2019, and it got delayed because of the hurricane. But yeah,
I remember the hurricane.
Yeah, me and all the boys were like had never gone through a hurricane before. All the dudes who were from like Florida and from like the South and stuff, they all went back home. They said screw it. But all of us guys who were like all the West Coast guys and the guys from the North were like, man, we're gonna stay here and ride it out. We didn't realize that they shut the power off 3 days before the hurricane, and we spent like 3 weeks without power. And it was just sucked.
Yeah, I remember because we had already chopped over to 1-2 for our deployment for our workup, and their orders were, if you live in the barracks, you're staying. Yeah. So I remember because, I mean, you know, I'm from Louisiana, so I've been through more than a few hurricanes. I went through Katrina, Rita, Ivan, the whole Gustav, the whole nine. And when we got the word like, oh, we have to shelter in place, because at that time they were still broadcasting a Cat 5 storm coming in. And I'm like, you want us to shelter in place for a Cat 5 storm? I was pissed. Yeah.
I remember we had all stocked up. Me and my roommate Missiak, we had bought every case of beer we could find for like a week beforehand, and probably 4/5 of whiskey or something like that. And it was all gone in like a week and a half. We'd done the math. It was like 11 gallons of beer and like 4/5 of whiskey that we all drank in like a week and a half. That was just between the two of us. Since we couldn't go out to take the trash out and stuff, we would just crush the cans with the door open, and we'd just throw them out the door, and they'd get sucked away and like mock Jesus. That was probably not the right thing to do, but that was what we had to do. Otherwise, we would have been swimming in beer cans. And then Missiak got so drunk that he tried walking up to the downstairs, and he rode his shin bone down the steel steps and completely like gutted his shin, and had to get stitches done in like a completely powered down hospital. And he was so blacked out that that he didn't even feel it or care. But yeah, it was pretty funny. They had made drinking on base illegal for like a day because they were catching so many drunk Marines walking down PT Road that were like wading through the river water. But
yeah, I remember that now.
Yeah, and there was a boat stuck in the middle of the road for like a week, and there was a car crashed into a tree that they'd taken all the VIN plates off of. Yeah, I remember that. That was a fun storm.
Yeah, I remember hearing about the boat because I think Mobley and McGovern went down there to go check it out.
Yeah, a bunch of people jumped on it, and they were like standing in it and like partying in this like beached boat in the middle of the road. I think they had to have PMO go and like watch the thing until they could tow it out of there. Yeah, that was.
So you spent most of your time with Bravo, and then it was probably when we got back from our deployment in July, August 2019.
Yeah.
It wasn't too long. I don't know if you chopped over then. I know Miziak did.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. So our platoons in Bravo had kind of rotated around a little bit leading up, and then our chop over, it was about then. I remember it was, I'm trying to think. No, I think it was a little bit later, because in 2019, what was that? May of 2019, I had gone with Bravo Company to Finland. Well, it wasn't Bravo Company, it was just 1st Platoon Bravo Company. We had gone to Finland for for exercise Aero 19. And we had gotten back, we had gotten our new boots, and then we had chopped over. And I remember that was right towards the beginning of COVID, because we had been selected for it was 1st Platoon had been selected to go on the MEU, because they only wanted 1 platoon of LAR. And then they were just going to take the AT section. So it was going to be a platoon plus, and then they had opted for a few more LAVs. The MEU wanted a few more LAVs. So they made it basically a slightly larger platoon plus almost 2 platoons. So they got 2 more LAVs, LAV 25s, and there was going to be 6 LAV 25s, 2 ATs, the wrecker, and logistics vehicle. And then they had petitioned for 1 more logistics vehicle, and then they added a whole nother platoon and just made it a company minus. Then what was originally weapons platoon got folded into 2nd Platoon, and then 2nd Platoon became an experimental hunter killer team with LAVs, following similar protocol to how Javelin teams work. That was pretty cool. And we had done some throughout the whole workup, trying to do new SOP practices and figuring out different ways to be able to utilize an LAV hunter-killer team. Basically modeling it off of a combination between how Cat platoons operate and how Javelin teams operate, and just kind of figuring out how to do that with 14-ton vehicles. Yeah, I remember, because we had, when I had chopped over, it was like right at the beginning of COVID, because we had, when the COVID lockdowns first started, dudes were starting to, because they were cooped up in the barracks, starting to get in fights like every night. And then we were doing a going away party for Mulcahy as my senior, and then one of the other dudes from Bravo Company. And we were doing 2 separate going away parties at the same time. And then it just turned into one giant brawl where everyone just started beating the crap out of each other. We had this female lieutenant. It was her first time as OOD. And she had come out of the duty hut and seen just probably close to 300 or 400 Marines just beating the crap out of each other. And I swear she must have been like 5'2". It was just this small person. And all she did was she took her gun out of her holster and just held it in the air. And she was like, I don't know what to do. And I forget who it was. It was one of the gunnies. And he was just like, just let it ride. And it was just, all they did was they just called up PMO, and they just held everybody in the same area till everyone either got knocked out, blacked out, or went back in their room. And, but they didn't show up in time. And someone from artillery across the street started throwing beer bottles at someone's truck. And then Bravo Company and Charlie Company, were seconds before beating the piss out of each other, picked each other up, ran over to artillery, and just started decking anyone that was outside, just pummeling people. And then PMO showed up and contained it. And it was just, I mean, you can't make stuff up like that. You can't just, even, you don't see that stuff in Hollywood, let alone just, it's just a crazy time. But yeah, that was right at the beginning of our chop over. And right when COVID started to calm down, well, not calm down, but enough where they started figuring out the regulations. There's probably about a month or two into our chop over that we actually started like going out and starting to do training and figuring out what to do and stuff like that. So what sucked is we'd started our workup while we were still just a platoon plus, and then every single time we added people, we had to restart the whole thing, so everyone got caught up. So first platoon and the weapons guys ended up doing the same workup 3 times over at the same time. Not to mention, since we had to go out and cross train with 1-8, they would send out like 1 or 2 companies and rotate their companies out for the training, whereas LAR had to go with every single training cycle because we were the only LAVs. And so we would go out. It was like deployment on base. We would go out for a week and a half, come back for a day and a half, go back out for a week, come back for 2 days, go back out, come back for 6 hours and go back out. Like we were just constantly to the point where like all of our vehicles had broken down because we just didn't have the time to maintain them or do anything because we were just constantly training. We had done that for the better part of a year, maybe a year plus. We hit all the check marks. We did all of the different training, got to do some cool stuff. And then we did a rotation through California. We'd done the underwater egress training. We'd done, even through COVID, managed to do every single check mark on the workup sheet. When we finally were getting ready to board for our last ship op, the way we were going to do it was we were going to board. We had to do 3 ship ops. One was just like 3 days, and then one was like, I think, a week. And then the last one was going to be for 2 weeks, but that was going to go straight into the deployment. So we had done, on the final ship op, we had loaded up on the LCACs, on the aircraft, the hovercrafts, gone out to the ship. We had boarded the ship, and we ended up doing ship ops and just living on ship for 2 weeks. And we went, I think, down to the Gulf of Mexico and then back up. We came back onto the beach in North Carolina one last time to pick up a few extra dudes who were quarantined during that time for COVID. And when they got cleared, they got on ship with us. And a few people who didn't get cleared, we had spent 2 weeks going back up to Norfolk. So they got bussed up to Norfolk. We picked him up in Norfolk. And then there was one dude with us, Corbett. He ended up getting COVID again. And they ended up just flying him straight to Spain. And he got like a month free in Spain just hanging out. So he showed up. He had tan lines all over him. And, you know, we had been living in the steel ship for the whole time. So we were like, oh, nice of you to join us. But yeah, after leaving Norfolk, we had crossed the Atlantic. We'd hit one bad storm, enough to, one dude got sent off the ship because he got thrown out of the 4th rack, ended up cracking his forehead on the floor, and he got all messed up, and they sent him home. One of our guys who was on the other ship, because first platoon had got put onto, I guess it was the San Antonio, he was in the gym, he was benching, and he ended up having a pectoral detachment, and he ended up getting sent home. But yeah, we had pretty much had a pretty smooth, I mean, other than the butting heads of just general butting heads between the Navy and the Marine Corps, it was pretty smooth Marine Corps wide. You know, units weren't really being assholes to each other than just wanting their personal space. So like random dude walks through your berthing and you're like, who the fuck are you? You know, kind of stuff. But other than that, it really was pretty uneventful. We'd, because of COVID, been pretty much trapped on ship the whole time. The MEU before us got real screwed. They spent basically the entire MEU just sitting on ship. They didn't get off like at all. Whereas for us, we had, trying to think the first place we stopped. First place we stopped, I believe, was Spain. I think when we first got there, we first got to Spain. And we did disembark, clean the vehicles. We were there for a good couple of days. I think we got 2 or 3 days liberty there. It was all restricted to the base. We weren't allowed to leave anywhere, walk around, or check out anything. But we had done that. After leaving Spain, we went back up the European coast, and we floated around a little bit in Norway, around Norway. I think we did like some kind of like ship ops. I don't know. It didn't involve us. It was the Navy was doing their training, so we were just hanging out. And then we had gone and done, mostly just as an excuse to try to get some of the Marines off ship. They had needed to do flight ops for the LCACs. We ended up disembarking in Scotland, and we got to do some, it was like 5 hours. We just kind of made some BS training and just kind of got to spend some time on dry land in Scotland, which was actually surprisingly cold. It was still, we had left Norfolk in March, so we had gotten to, I guess it was about May when we were in Scotland. And after leaving Scotland, we had worked our way back down to the Gulf or the Mediterranean and stuff. But yeah, I guess I'm just ranting. I guess I'm just rambling about the deployment right now.
No, this is good. Keep going.
Okay. And so yeah, after leaving Scotland, we had worked our way down and went through, I guess, what is that? The Strait of Gibraltar, through the Mediterranean, the mouth of the Mediterranean. And that was our first time doing any kind of, well, we'd done a live shoot out in the Atlantic, and that was pretty cool. But our first time actually doing any kind of actual security was through the Strait of Gibraltar. And that was pretty cool, being able to look on one side of the ship and seeing Europe, and the other side you see Africa. It's a pretty cool area. You see it's a lot of cargo ships and fishing vessels and stuff, so you get to see a lot of nation flags flying around and stuff like that. So you're just looking around, but there's no real threats in that area. I mean, you're just kind of looking out, but the probability is so slim that it's more or less just being there is enough of a deterrent for them to want to do anything. So we had made our way through after leaving through the strait, and made our way up to Greece. Well, specifically, we went to Crete, and that was our first time actually getting the opportunity to go out and see actual like different points of interest on the island. They had like a vineyard, and there's like an olive farm or whatever you want to call it to go check out, and you can go to the beach and things like that. But you had to buy tickets because they could only allow so many people, and tickets all got bought up by the Navy the second they dropped, because it was everyone who wasn't doing anything. And on their sleep cycles, their buddies all went and bought them tickets, and we had training to do on ships. So by the time we got done with all of our training, there was no tickets left for anybody. So it was basically all the Navy got to go check out everything. We just had to stay on the pier and drink, which ended up not working out for the Navy because the Marines got all drunk and threw up everywhere. And yeah, it didn't work. People got hit, but that's just how it goes. But I think that was around. So also on the deployment, I forgot to say, we had an incident. We called him the Phantom Shitter, and he would just, or she, we don't know, to this day we don't know who it was, and they would just go around the ship to all the blind points, and we don't know if it was Marine Corps or we assume it's Navy because it's happened on other ships, but they go to all the blind spots of the security cameras and just take a dump on the floor, and someone would find it the next day. And it was all over the ship. There was one in the shower. There was one in the well deck between like Humvees, and there was it finally culminated and stopped when someone had taken a dump in the vending machine room, and some like Navy Master Chief had like stepped in there and stepped in it and slipped and like busted his kneecap in the doorway. Yeah, it stopped after that because they realized that if it happened again, they were gonna probably get court-martialed or something. But yeah, that was pretty funny. But yeah, so that stopped right around the time we were in Crete, I believe. So yeah, we'd gone to Crete. That was pretty cool, getting to check out the because they would still have civilians and different cultural things come to the piers to meet us, and we get to check it out. So it was cool getting to still have at least interactions with locals and stuff like that. Crete was it's a naval port too, so they have a small runway, so you get to see some of the Greek fighter planes taking off, and they had military personnel that we were getting to talk to and stuff like that. So that was pretty cool. When we finally packed up and left, that was also the same time that the Navy got busted because someone had taken a picture, made a meme about the Iwo Jima being super rusty, And in 3 days, they had to repaint the whole ship because they got yelled at by I think it was the Secretary of the Navy. Yeah, so in like 3 days, they painted the whole ship over. So yeah, we packed it up out of Crete and rolled out. That was right around June, I believe, because it was just starting to get pretty warm around that time. That was our last stop in the Mediterranean, because then we got authorization to go to Sixth Fleet in, I guess that's the Red Sea on the far end of the Suez Canal.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure everything past the Suez, like the Red Sea, the Persian Gulf, and the Indian Ocean. I'm pretty sure that's all Sixth Fleet AO.
Yeah. I think we got basically authorization just for the Red Sea. So we had packed it up and rolled out, and we were going to go through the Suez, and that was the second time we were going to hold security. And they were having us on deck with the javelins. They had pulled us as extra missilemen because the Cat platoon was on one of the other ships. So the Jav teams and the LAR missilemen were the ones that they pulled to hold javelin security on the ship. And that was the first time we actually had an area where there was possibly going to be any real threat. So we had a much more in-depth safety brief and intel brief about what to look for, things like that. It was still pretty low and pretty safe. I think the last real incident was like several years beforehand. They had like fired an RPG and it went over the ship, and it wasn't even remotely close to hitting anything. That was like probably, I think 2018, 2017, something like that.
I'm pretty sure I know the incident you're talking about, because that was Alpha Company's deployment.
Mm-hmm.
The end of 2016 going into 2017.
Yeah, that might have been it.
Because when I got to LAR, I was with Delta Company, and then Alpha Company came back and they wanted to turn it into a experimental weapons company.
Yeah,
for LAR, and so all weapons guys got chopped over to Alpha for a little bit. Well, yeah. Most of us. Bravo was gone on their deployment, I'm pretty sure.
Mm-hmm.
And those guys came back, and some of them had like cars because the incident with the RPG fired at their ship.
Yeah.
And the captain of the boat wanted his combat action. So everybody that was on the boat got a combat action.
Yeah.
Most of them, to their credit, didn't wear it, but a few did, and a bunch of them were just assholes.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I think that was the last incident they had talked about. They'd said like another vessel had a grenade dropped on it off of one of the bridges, and that was pretty well secured by the time we'd gotten through there. So for the most part, it was kind of chill out. I mean, you're still holding security, but I mean, we had Egyptian trucks following us on the roads next to the Suez the whole time, and they had dudes posted every 100 yards holding security. So it was more or less just showing that we were also holding security, but I mean, it was still a security position, but it was just supplementary at that point. They were basically like, if anyone takes any fire, just only return fire if you're directly taking fire. So it wasn't even like a preemptive kind of thing. It was just holding security because you have to kind of thing. So, but that was pretty cool because I mean, you're just going straight through Egypt on a ship, so you're going through on a naval ship basically through the desert. So that's a pretty cool experience. It was getting real hot around that time. That was right around July. So you're sitting on top of an aircraft carrier in Egypt in June, July. It definitely gets hot. So we were taking shifts. But yeah, we had gone through the Suez, made our way out to Sixth Fleet, and that I guess that would have still had to have been June. So it's probably mid-June at that point, early mid-June, maybe June 10th. Don't quite remember the exact date off my head. But yeah, we had gone through there. No, actually it would have had to have been before that because we had spent a good long time in Saudi Arabia. So it was trying to think. Yeah, so it would have had to have been early June because then we'd gone to Oman. We had done training in Saudi Arabia. And yeah, that was it. We'd done training in Saudi Arabia, and that was like a month we were there. And we were we were just doing regular desert ops and different kinds of training. We tried to bring missiles with us and actually get to shoot. They didn't want to use them in case we got sent into a combat situation, even though they had a training allotment with them. A lot of good that helped. Yeah, we ended up not being able to shoot any missiles, so we mostly in our training there we had done some maneuver training, some machine gun ranges, mostly just getting used to the weather in Sixth Fleet, getting used to the desert and stuff like that. I mean, a bunch of us have done training out in the California deserts, but this is the first time where it was like foreign desert, which really wasn't all that much different. Yeah, we done some cool training. We got to do some like different stuff we weren't allowed to do in the States, like dismount training, firing, straight out of the vehicles and things like that. So that was pretty fun. That was pretty cool. I mean, it almost got to the point where we had time but couldn't think of things to do, so we just thought of cool training to do and we just did it. Yeah, it was a good time. I enjoyed it. It was really hot though, but it was fun. And at that point, we really thought that was going to be the culminating point of our deployment. Like that was going to be it. We were just going to do a month in Saudi Arabia, maybe check out another country or two, and then head back home. So we had left Saudi Arabia, and we had moved up the sea a bit and went to Oman and did another port in Oman. That would have been July at that point. That was when things started picking up. People started talking about the whispers about Afghanistan and things like that. I mean, you get those whispers throughout the whole deployment, people saying that they heard from some guy from their mom that they're going to go to this place or something else. So, I mean, at that point, at that late in the deployment, almost none of us, we were so skeptical because we had all been told about different things, about different training, countries, all kinds of stuff that was just shot down before we even got ready for it, that we're like, okay, dude, well, I'll see it when I believe it. So we had gone to Oman and we started hearing the whispers about shit's destabilizing in Afghanistan, things are going down, they're pulling out troops and things are collapsing, things like that. So we're like, yeah, but it's probably just, they're going to pull them out, they're going to send them right back or something else. So we had done Oman. That was our last Liberty port. Then we had gone up the deeper into the sea, and they went, okay, so we secured you guys some more training. And they said, we're gonna hit two birds with one stone. We're gonna get you guys into Kuwait and get some more training and things like that. And then Kuwait was on and off and on and off. And then they ultimately said, yes, we're gonna send you to Kuwait. You guys are gonna hang out there, do some training, chill. If they need you, they need you. Just be ready on standby. So we had disembarked and landed in Kuwait. The vehicles stayed back. They disembarked with us, but ultimately the vehicles stayed at the naval yards in Kuwait. While we all got on buses, they had a skeletal crew stay back to clean the vehicles when we were in Kuwait and to do any maintenance that was needed. The rest of us got sent to Al Jaber, which was a Air Force fob, if you want to call it a fob. And we had waited there. That was where we actually caught up with 1st Platoon, because they were almost on their whole different deployment, because their ship captain is like way more fun and actually cared about people. So they got to go to a whole bunch of other countries. They spent like, I think, a day or two in England, and they had gone to, I think they were in Israel, maybe. I forget. They went to like 3 more countries than we did, and actually got to like have time out in town and stuff. So, but we had caught up with them at these, they were basically abandoned modular rooms that they were using for the aircraft dudes, or the Air Force dudes. But they ended up being so old that they were just going to knock them down. But before they knocked them down, they put us up in them, which it's funny because they were still nicer than our barracks rooms. So we got put up in there, and they were like, hey guys, we're gonna acclimate. It was ungodly hot in Kuwait. I mean, it was up into the 120s pretty regularly. And that wasn't even like a real feel. That was like the air temperature. It was like 120 degrees. I think one day it pushed like 131. it was hot. So we had done some acclimating PT and stuff like that in the morning. And then we would just kind of mill around all day, just figuring out classes to do, just doubling up on stuff. And the whole time, you're just getting more and more of these whispers down the lane. And now it's starting to come from like intel guys and like guys who actually have some credibility. They're like, hey, some shit's starting to go down, shit's popping off, things like that. And we're like, okay, yeah, right, okay. And then it started coming from the gunnies and the lieutenants and stuff like that. Like, okay. Then you're starting to kind of get into more of like a ready mindset. And they're like, hey, yeah, this is no shit. Like, just don't be freaking out and stuff like that. Don't be expecting it. Just kind of mentally prepare in case and stuff like that. Day by day, it would kind of become more serious and more talked about. And it was getting whispered through other platoons and things like that. It was sometime in August, maybe sometime around like August 8th, August 10th. They're like, hey, we're on standby, like no shit standby. Like pack all your gear, get ready to roll. They had set up a training. They're like, hey, they're gonna send you guys in for the evacuations in Afghanistan, or at least they're having you guys on standby for it. So in the upcoming day and couple days, we'd done some theoretical classes about like it was so expedited it's even hard to keep track of. They were like showing us how to use the data entry tools of like for logging people and looking for possible wanteds for the FBI and CIA and NSA and things like that. And the next day they're doing detainment techniques and crowd control and how to use nightsticks and things like that. And then they had set it up with the Air Force where they got all non-working Air Force personnel and they were staging practice evacuation lines where like it's exactly what you think the Air Force would set up, where it's just lines of people doing exactly what you say, that they all speak the same language, they all tell them to do something, they comply, and even the non-compliant people are still halfway reasonable and things like that. So it's like the training did not match what happened in the absolute slightest. It was almost completely useless. They had really high hopes for what was going to happen. Yeah, we got the call that Alpha Company was going in, Alpha Company 1-8. They were going to get their first response. They had left, I think, on like the 12th. I remember that, just seeing dudes very serious, grabbing their shit, heading over to the staging pavilion, things like that. They were like, hey, they're going in. We're going to follow up eventually. So get your shit ready. We don't know who's going when or who's going what or things like that. So just get ready. They're like, make the preparations you got to make. They're like, don't tell anybody because we don't know what's going on. We don't want to freak people out. We don't want to give away anything about any of that stuff. So they were like, you can kind of tell people, but don't be specific. Just be vague. Be like, hey, that thing in Afghanistan's going down. We're heading out too. That kind of stuff. So, and then we were prepared on standby. The next day, I think they sent Bravo Company. We were just waiting. We were like, we don't know if we're going to be the last ones or the next ones. Everything was by the hip. So we didn't know when we were going to leave. So they just had us, ready. They told us not to PT, don't do anything, just stand by. That's the last thing that they need is someone hurting themselves and not being able to go and things like that. So it came down to, I think it was the 14th or the 15th, maybe. I could have my days wrong. Around that time, it was so difficult to keep track of what was going on just because of so much inconsistency with the word and what was happening. Because it would change by the minute, if that. So we had actually gotten the call to stage probably 3 or 4 times before we actually were leaving. First platoon went before us. They staged. They ended up waiting there. I don't think that they left without us. We had been staged, and then they came back, and then we staged, and then we came back, and then it was just this we were starting to get annoyed because it was this. I mean, it's a lot of gear that you're moving, and you're walking through Kuwait. It's not a breeze in the park, but that was just like setting the tone for just the inconsistency the whole time. So we eventually got the no shit call, like, hey, you're definitely going this time, which even then we didn't know if it was still definite. We were still, I mean, literally up until the point we had boots on the ground in Afghanistan, we were waiting for the plane to turn around. We still had no faith in any of the absoluteness about what was going on. It wasn't until we started loading magazines that it started dawning on us what we were going to do. And they had actually given us hollow point rounds, which was the first time I'd ever been issued hollow points, for the fact that they were expecting such a density of people that if we had to engage people, they didn't want overpenetration and civilians 3 and 4 deep behind them to get hurt. So they started issuing us hollow points for that specific reason. We had been keeping track on the news. We had actually had to follow the news because of the word coming from our, it's not even their fault, like our direct chain of command. They had not even gotten word so much that nobody knew what was going on. So we had to keep track with the news, even while we were there. Guys who had their phones were following like CNN and Fox and all these just to find out what the hell's going on, because we had no word from anybody. We knew basically we were going into, at that point, it had already fallen and it had been completely controlled by the Taliban. We knew that we were going into a hostile environment. We had already gotten reports that Alpha Company had taken engagements and they had 2 confirmed kills. So we were already expecting this to be an absolute nightmare. We got in the rundown about the layout of Kabul, about how it's just a bowl. It's surrounded basically on 2 sides by mountains, and the rest of the airport is within a city, so you're basically surrounded by hotels, high-rise hotels all the way around the airport. So they were explaining to us that there's really nowhere to take cover. You're going to be watched the whole time. They have the high ground at all times. They've already taken engagements, things like that. We had seen, before we had left, they had already had the storming of the runway while we were still in Kuwait. And we'd seen the footage very soon before we left of the plane taking off and people falling off and things like that. So to a bunch of the guys, I mean, it's messed up, but it was still like not even a real thing. And a lot of guys didn't find it specifically funny, but just were like, man, this is such a mess. Look at this, things like that. Just kind of like looking. It's like watching a horrible video on the internet, but it's like not pertinent to you. It's not real, so you don't have any real sentiment towards it. So there was guys who were just like, oh, this is messed up, but whatever, man. We ended up loading up onto buses, and they took us to the Kuwait airport. From there, I'm trying to remember if I guess from there we took I believe it was a passenger plane to Qatar. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it was a C-17 that we took from Kuwait to Qatar. But I remember we had to stop in Qatar because we were going to make a direct flight straight to Afghanistan, but the runway got taken over again. We got reports that the ANA had showed up on scene, or at least the ANA Special Forces, and that they were assisting, and that other nations were assisting. Turkey and other nations in the area were also assisting at the airport. So we had stopped in Qatar, and when we had unloaded from the plane, we were going to wait in a waiting area while they refueled the plane, did some last minute maintenance that they needed to do. Then we were going to reload whenever they could. And we'd seen another C-17 sitting on the runway surrounded by emergency vehicles, and with all their lights going off and things like that. We were curious as to what was going on. And then we had found out that that was the plane that had taken off from Afghanistan, and they were there because they had found a body in the landing gear, and they were trying to unwedge it from I think it was the left side landing gear. Maybe it was the right side, but it looked like they were working on the left side landing gear. They had all flashlights up in there, trying to unwedge this person's body. And that's when it was a lot more sobering, because the plane we had watched on the video was right there, and we realized we were getting closer and closer as the hours passed. I guess that was probably around the same time that we had gotten the reports of Alpha Company taking fire and engaging 2 Taliban fighters and killing them. That's when things started to speed up. We chilled out for a few hours trying to find out as much as we could, following the news. A couple of the guys had made friends with guys in Alpha Company, so those guys who were able to talk were trying to, but I don't know how successful they were, how busy that they were trying to handle everything there. I think before it was even light, we'd gotten back onto, I guess it was, this time we were definitely on a C-17, because this was the plane that actually took us into Afghanistan. They had packed us in like sardines, absolute sardines. We were basically sitting with our equipment running perpendicular or parallel to us in between, and everyone was just sitting, back to chest with your legs up, and it was highly uncomfortable. But everyone was it was very strange, because it was loud. You could hear the engines, but those C-17s fly extremely smooth. There was no turbulence. There was no, it almost felt like you were sitting on the ground. There's no window, so you can't see you're flying. So all we had was some dim lights and the sound of the engines. Other than that, really nobody talked. It was just quiet the whole flight in. Everyone was just getting mentally prepared after, hearing about the engagements and watching the videos and things like that. We got told that we were getting ready to land, and it was the next morning. It was about a 5-hour flight. I think we showed up, I don't know, sometime in the morning, probably around like 9-ish, give or take an hour or two. Around 9 in the morning. We landed. I was personally expecting the amount of contact we had heard and the amount of gunfire. I was almost expecting, essentially D-Day with sniper fire. I was expecting just as soon as they saw more troops coming out of the plane, snipers to just start shooting at us. And so they were like, hey, just get ready to just run off the plane if you need to.